Vi is one of the easiest characters in the game to recommend to any player. She's one of the most fun champions available due to her mobility, damage, and crowd control, which makes her a viable pick regardless of the meta. Not only that, but whether you're a new player looking for a champion with an easy, straightforward kit to pick up and have success with, or a veteran looking for a challenging kit to master, then she's got you covered. In this guide, we're going to cover everything from playstyle, power spikes, combos, tips and tricks, jungle clearing, and builds so you can instantly begin winning games as Vi, but have a ton of subtleties to master so you never get bored with her either. Let's get into it! Kicking things off with playstyle. As Vi, you should be aware that you're one of the best duelists in the game. With your high mobility, burst, crowd control, and insane DPS, there are very few champions in the game who can stand toe-to-toe with you, which means that your goal during most of the game as Vi is to find as many one-on-one fights as you can. You should abuse players trying to farm side lanes by themselves as often as you can for free kills. That's not to say that you can't teamfight though. Vi rivals Malphite as one of the best diving champions in the game. Due to her unstoppable ultimate, there's literally nothing that can prevent you from getting to the enemy carries in teamfights to delete them. Whether you want to operate as a solo brawler or coordinate with your team depends on the game and your playstyle, and that versatility is what makes Vi such a strong champion in solo queue. Moving on to power spikes, there's two big ones to keep in mind. Your first one will be at level 9, once you've maxed out your Q. Prior to this, Vi can be a bit easy to get away from since her Q's CC isn't that great at sticking onto targets. But once you have the ability maxed out, the cooldown is absurdly short. There's literally no getting away from her once it's maxed, and this is when you really come online in the game. That brings us to her second spike, which is once you complete your Sheen item, whether it's Divine Sunder or Trinity Force. Along with her Q's short cooldown, Vi has a ton of ways of proccing Sheen items due to her E's charge mechanic. Your DPS goes through the roof at this stage of the game. Pair that with the fact that no one can get away from you, and it becomes super easy to pick up kills everywhere you go. But let's get into how to actually play her now. If there's one thing every Vi main will agree on that's vital for success, then it's gotta be proper auto weaving. Almost all of Vi's combos are centered around weaving autos in between abilities. Here's what a new Vi player looks like when they're comboing someone. They just go in and smash every button they can. Meanwhile, here's an experienced Vi that knows how to weave in autos between every spell. Notice that with the same combo, there's around a 400 damage difference, and that scales more and more as the game goes on. Basically, you just need to keep in mind that your E is an auto reset, and that your Q and ultimate animations last long enough that your auto cooldown will come back up as you perform them. The following is a perfect example of what we mean. As Shin engages onto Vi in the river, notice how she follows through with her abilities. She starts with Q, auto, and then E's for the auto reset. We'll come back to this clip later for why she doesn't ult immediately, but when she does, notice how it's right after an auto attack. That way, during her ult's animation, it's coming off cooldown, and she comes down to auto, Q, auto, and then finishes things off with her E. If there's one thing to take away from this guide, it should be this. Learning to be as fluid as possible with your auto weaving is essential to your success. If you focus on getting this down, you will be dealing a lot more damage in your games and scoring kills that you would have completely missed otherwise. As for actual mechanic-based combos, Vi only has two you need to know. First is Q/Q. You should know that your Q's animation will not be cancelled after you press flash. This is a very important tip for situations like the following. Your opponents who know how Vi works will often try to body block your Q to prevent you from where you want to dash towards. That's where this comes in clutch. You can just flash past them and then Q without anyone in the way. Using this combo, Vi went from getting caught out and dying to instead trading 1-for-1 in a hopeless situation. More often than not though, this is just used to gap close when your opponent is really far away. You will be using this combo at least 2 to 3 times a game if you're playing properly, so make sure to get comfortable doing so. And her final mechanical combo is just QQ Flash instead. This accomplishes effectively the same thing as the previous combo does, but slightly different. Instead of dashing after your flash, you're instead abusing the fact that Vi's Q hitbox is still active for a brief moment right after you flash. While the other is a bit more versatile in the timing window, this one is mostly for catching your opponents off guard. Having both in your back pocket as you play Vi is pivotal for your success though. Alright, let's move on to the most important tips and tricks you'll need to succeed in your games. The most important mechanic to keep in mind in regards to your ultimate is that it does damage and knocks back any target it passes through. Not only that, but it does the exact same damage to those targets as it does to your main target, which is insane. You should always be making a conscious effort to maximize this damage whenever possible. For example, in this team fight, Vi has clear access to the enemy Kog'Maw, a high value target. but instead of immediately jumping onto him, she cues towards Lulu and Nami, who are clumped up. Vi's goal was to put as many people between her and Kog'Maw as possible. That way, when she ulted, she's knocking up everyone around her. By thinking about positioning in regards to her ultimate, she dealt over 1,000 damage with it, while also CCing 3 people. We shouldn't need to tell you just how crazy that value is at this stage of the game from a single ability. Now, if you really want to get fancy with this, then there's a very niche mechanic you should be aware of. You can actually flash during your ult's animation. So even if your opponents aren't lined up for your ultimate, you can still pull off what we just talked about. This is definitely more of a styling move though, but that's literally what League of Legends is all about. And speaking of style, your E is one of the flashiest ways of finishing off your opponents. Although you have to be in melee range to use it, remember that the range of the collateral damage behind your target is massive. When you can't reach your intended target to finish them off, then you should always be thinking about using your E as the finishing move to catch them by surprise. Minions or even towers will do in a pinch. Cut the clip, cut the clip. Now let's talk about the less interesting but super important parts of Vi's kit, her W and passive. Starting with her W, remember that when you proc it on your opponent, that it will reduce their armor by a significant amount. Oftentimes, Vi players want to engage on their opponents with her ultimate, but that's actually not always ideal. Whenever possible, you should always try to reach them with Q and quickly proc your passive, and only then should you use your ultimate, so that it ignores 20% of their armor for higher burst damage. Not only that, but remember that proccing your W will lower the cooldown of your passive shield by 3 seconds. Do you recall that previous Xin Zhao clip? Well, there was another important tip going on here. Vi knew that this would be a long auto attack battle, which means multiple procs of her W. That's why she was saving her ultimate the whole time, in case she needed it to proc her passive later on, just as it was coming back up. Being aware of your passive's cooldown in fights, and whether you can get back up in time to save you, is something that you should be monitoring constantly in close encounters. And for our final tip, we'll just briefly remind you that your ultimate makes you completely unstoppable, and you should be abusing that to counter enemy CC. The best time to press your ultimate will almost always be right as your opponent commits their CC ability on you. In this case, right as Twisted Fate is throwing his gold card. Why this is so important is that if you press your ultimate right before you get hit, you're essentially negating their CC entirely. It will wear off before your animation ends, which means you come down free to do whatever you want, since your opponent just wasted their only tool to stop you. Here's another example, where the enemy Senna managed to land her root. Vi then easily counters it by ulting right before the root takes effect, allowing Vi to continue her onslaught uninterrupted. And as we mentioned at the start of the guide, let's cover a couple of tips that will make your jungle clear much smoother. First, remember that the jungle item applies a burn effect on jungle monsters when you damage them. This is what almost every low elo Vi fails to take advantage of. Do not spam your abilities as they come up on jungle camps. You have access to 3 AoE abilities from your Q and 2 Es. On camps with multiple monsters, you'll want to space these out so that you can keep reapplying the burn on the smaller creatures while you focus down the big jungle monster. What we saw from the previous Vi is that she pressed her E way too early, not maximizing the burn duration on the small raptors. This is why it took her forever to clear the camp. Lastly, remember that your Q is both a damage and mobility spell. On camps that you can kite close to another camp, you can often get the ones you're killing low and finish it off with Q while dashing to your next target. Not only that, but your E's range can come into play as you kite the camps around as well. Her kit may be simple, but Vi can have one of the most complex jungle clears in the game if you really want to min-max it as much as possible. To wrap things up, let's go over your build. For your runes in the jungle, you'll generally want to run Hail of Blades, as it synergizes really well with Vi's 3-hit W passive. Your skill order should be the following. You start with W and E to clear the jungle, and then you end up maxing Q for reasons mentioned before. As for your items, your first one will be between Divine Sunderer and Trinity Force. Whichever one you build just depends on the game that you find yourself in. If you're in need of more health and tank shredding capabilities, then go Divine Sunderer. If you want to burst squishy targets and you think you don't need the survivability, then Trinity Force makes your damage absurd. Afterwards, just build any of these bruiser items depending on what you need in your specific game. Alright guys, that should be everything you need to get started playing Vi.
Now, what you find here on YouTube is just the tip of the iceberg. If you want to unlock your true potential, then you need to dive into SkillCapped.com. We have the largest catalog of League of Legends guides in the entire world, with over 1,500 guides and 350 unique courses. You get brand new guides every week exclusive to our website, along with our Smurf commentaries where our challenger experts walk you through how to carry out of the exact rank you're stuck in. Still unsure? Well, you can have all your questions answered by those same challenger experts. Need one-on-one coaching? We got you covered with hand-picked coaches trained to the highest standard. Don't have time for that? Use Direct Pro. Pick a past game you played and within 24 hours get a personalized video from a top 100 challenger player breaking down exactly what you can do better. The best part, all of this comes with a rank improvement guarantee. If you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using SkillCapped, you can claim a refund, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Head to SkillCapped.com and get the rank you've always wanted. Link in the description below.
We hope you have fun punching your way into a victory screen every game. Catch ya in the next video.